The clown world of 2019 just keeps on giving. In two recent reports, somewhere upward of 40% of American people now embrace some form of socialism. You know, the ideology that has claimed more lives than perhaps all of the other main isms combined, with shining examples including the Soviet Union, China, and Pol Pot's Cambodia. The other is, again, and somewhere upward of 40%, and this time students in the United States. Well, they oppose freedom of speech and are in favor of implementing the same cowering, totalitarian, right-think speech codes that currently plague countries in Europe as well as America's increasingly socialist-loving neighbor to the north, Canada. The question is, how did this come to be, and where will these kinds of developments lead should they remain unchecked and unchallenged? This video is kindly sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, a game that I recommended to you previously, and it's now having a special global tournament that is happening right now. You can compete with me and millions of others in a massive area tournament with in-game prizes and of course physical ones too, and should you win, they will be delivered straight to your house. The game is brand new and it's a free-to-play mobile RPG game with a cool storyline, amazing graphics, lots of customization of hundreds of champions, and giant boss fights. Now is a great time to join, and you can do so with my links in the description and get 50,000 silver immediately, plus a free epic champion as a new player program, and you'll also be automatically entered into the special launch tournament right away. For most in the US, the molding of young minds to the dominant cultural meta-narrative begins with public schooling. Unless you have lots of money to send your child to a private school, or one parent who is able to stay home and homeschool, most kids are sent to public schools. Now, who decides what gets taught in these schools? Oh, that's right, the government, through education inspection and funding. And with much of the public schooling system in the US currently, and especially in urban areas, well, they are little more than containment zones. After about the 5th or 6th grade, when students have mastered reading and simple arithmetic, very little practical or useful knowledge is passed on to students, who will spend the next 6 to 7 more years in the public school system. Between the ever-increasing lack of respect for school faculty, navigating the increasing diversity and fluid and ever-changing social dynamics between groups, the snap hall attacks and weaves being pulled out randomly, the public school system serves as a plank for the establishment, and the establishment of academia in 2019 is thoroughly imbued with a Marxist slant. And proof of this isn't hard to find, as the public school system has for several decades now ideologically been preparing young Americans to embrace the ever-accelerating move towards socialism and away from individual freedom and, more importantly, individual responsibility. Nowhere can this be more clearly seen than in the continual erosion of support for the First Amendment. The erosion is especially marked in the hyper-diverse groups that make up the youth and students in American colleges and universities. And put simply, a recent poll, and you really need to take any poll with a grain of salt, but in a recent poll, it has concluded that as many as 41% of students enrolled in a 4-year degree program, and these are the people that are most vulnerable to the ideological conditioning that centers of higher learning have become. A good chunk of these people do not support freedom of speech. The report's exploration of perceptions of race, gender, sexual orientation, and religion further highlights stark differences in students' views on these issues. And thus, it also comes as no surprise, as reported in a new Gallup poll, that suggests 4 in 10 Americans embrace some form of socialism. Given the K to bachelor's ideological training, the changing cultural paradigm that weds honor culture with dignity culture, an entire video on this subject can be found in the back catalog of this channel. Links are in the description. The United States, like the entire Western world for that matter, is now fully ensconced in a culture of competing victim groups who are jostling for position within the hierarchy of oppression. Adding to this socialist ideology are the very real economic concerns most people have, especially those that have entered the workforce in the past 20 years, and the reality they've had to contend with. Rapid globalization, offshoring of industry, increased inflation, stagnant wages, mass uncontrolled immigration, and all of this coupled with debt of every kind, and most especially for students, student university debt, which has crippled an entire generation and made them wage slaves to the system the very day they graduate. With all of this, it's very easy to understand the draw that many have to an ideology that espouses free shit for everyone, the hated rich paying for everything, and the dignity that many feel has been taken from them. Add to this that almost everything is now owned and controlled by multinational corporations, and the fact that even attempting to start your own business is to contend with said multinationals that have deep pockets and near infinite capital that can be brought to bear against any competition in the market. And this obviously further impedes people from taking control of their own destiny. And what this means is that it is a very tough place that the current generation of Americans, and in fact, most in the West, find themselves in. Thus, it makes clear sense of the current generation making an effigy of their vilification, that being the baby boom generation, who has seemingly squandered and poisoned the inheritance of all future generations. And again, this all makes a very nice ideological package for the current crop of rebels without a real cause. The reason being is that most have very little understanding of history or awareness that the so-called revolution is being manipulated and managed, not in the shadows, but right in the open by the same organs of globalism, most notably the financial cartels and their owned media. Think Vice, the Huffington Post, Salon, and BuzzFeed, that most in the ranks of young American socialists and communists ironically and unwittingly support. Thus, many young Americans are drawn to odious groups such as Antifa because at least at first glance their aims seem reasonable. Who doesn't want to fight for those that are being oppressed by the system? Smashing the system has been the prerogative of most of those in Western universities since at least the 1960s, and when suited up in a balaclava, a Che Guevara t-shirt, and a copy of Das Kapital in one hand and a bike lock in the other, hunting down those that do not subscribe to the same ideology of smashing oppression, well, the entire endeavor can be quite exciting and intoxicating in a way to the easily impressionable. The great irony of Antifa is that the so-called Nazis they are generally trying to smash are usually the working classes they claim to be comrades of and advocating for, as these people have not been as thoroughly brainwashed by the media and educational system. In fact, again, ironically, Antifa in practice is thoroughly hateful of the working classes, as it is made up of predominantly privileged middle-class youth that have come to ape the mental flatulence of the mainstream media and academia without even the slightest amount of self-reflection. Antifa is utterly intolerant to anyone with views not totally in alignment with their own, and are nothing but radicalized stormtroopers for the neoliberal globalism agenda of the multinationals and banking cartels. And the sad thing is, they cannot even recognize their own status as useful idiots. While playing at class politics and playing at dress-up with their friends, there is nothing new about their expression of tribal politics and tribal violence that they exude to those in the working classes as well as those that disagree with their extremism, which in fact is most of society. Thus, their desire to shut down any speech they see as not falling within their guidelines of correct thinking. What Antifa espouses is not courageous, nor is it tolerance. It is wanton anger, vile barbarism, intolerance, and it is a hate-filled, violent ideology that attempts to mask itself under the facade of organized virtue signaling, but it is clearly the ideology of revolutionary Marxism. Their desire for the erasure of freedom of speech and the implementation of socialism has a very easily identifiable track record. Many in Antifa, as well as those that are opposed to Marxism, hold to this idea that there will be some kind of spark, some kind of massive Bolshevik revolution that will, depending on which angle you take, liberate the masses or enslave them. However, almost certainly there will never be any revolution or happening, most likely as the middle class continues to evaporate and the United States continues to increase its hyperdiversity. The nation, without any kind of correction, will continue to degrade financially, socially, and culturally. In many places, the future has already arrived. One only need look at places such as Detroit and California for a roadmap to America's future. The ruling class wants division. It wants disunity. It wants these things as it wants an increasingly powerless pleb class that they mean to rule over. Rebellions are expensive and are not in their interest. Thus, they will continue to manage discontent via bought political access and the control of information and entertainment. As an individual, and especially for men, there are several things that you can do to fight back against your eventual dispossession that is intended for you and your family. Every single one of you should be working on some form of new business when and where it is possible, or attempt to be making inroads into positions with socially and culturally high influence industries. This would include banking, finance, education at all levels from K to college, law, politics, mainstream entertainment, social media, technology, and others. You add to the list in the comment section below. You are part of the first group of people on this planet in history that has access to all of the world's information for free. Do your own research and start taking steps to make it happen. You'll make mistakes. You'll learn, you'll progress. But what is most important right now is steering yourself away from the ideological trap that was set for you the day you entered kindergarten. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing. Also remember to support this channel and download Raid Shadow Legends. See you next time.